everybody, and welcome to Virtual TrekCon with Sirach Lofton.
Hello, hello.
Today, our guest is Mr. Doug Drexler. How are you, Doug? Nice.
You recognize the salute? You recognize it?
Is that a Gomer Pyle? I don't know.
Red Dwarf.
Red Dwarf, okay.
Red Dwarf. The river salute. You know, I taught Patrick Stewart how to do that salute.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Really? On Next Generation?
It was after Next Generation, but they were doing a special in England on Red Dwarf, and Patrick was the host. And they were shooting his, bumpers on the Paramount backlot. And at the close of the show, he's supposed to do the Rimmer salute, and he doesn't know what it is. And it's what I just did. It's a big overblown, salute that Rimmer does. And I was in the art department one day, and I got a call on the telephone, and it was a voice from the production office that said, "Are you Doug Drexler?" I'm like, "Yeah." They said, "Do you know how to do the Rimmer salute?" And I was like, totally like, what? Star Trek production office. I go, well, yeah, of course I do. And so they asked me to come over and show Patrick how to do it. And it was really funny because I showed him how to do it, but he couldn't, he's very, very stiff. He couldn't get it right. So I kind of got behind him and grabbed each of his arms, and I tell him to go ahead and do this. And I'd be going, let it go, let it loose. I wish I had it on videotape. It was hilarious.
Wow.
Yes, I taught him. It was me.
Wow.
Who do you think would have been the best at doing it naturally on Next Generation? I've got a guess. I got two guesses, in fact.
Yeah. Who do you think?
I think Brent Spiner, because he's very comedic and he's willing to let go. But the other one I thought secondarily was Gates McFadden, because she's a dancer, so she could. She's very loose and flowy.
Sure. Yeah, I could see that. Brent was hysterical on stage because he would use every minute to rehearse like a little bit of business. Like for instance, drawing his phaser, and then he came up with a way to flip it backwards into the little holster, and he would just rehearse that over and over, and you could see it when he does stuff on the show. Like for instance, Brent, the two guys who were the best at pressing buttons, Brent, he made it like a dance, and then there was LeVar, who was just incredible at pressing buttons. Button pressing, panel dancing. But I will give Patrick Stewart honorable mention because he really does it with intent. You get people who do it and they won't do it with, just the right amount of intent or creativity. There were shows where, if you looked at the panels, the interfaces, they were really, really thought out. The closer you looked at them, they weren't just a lot of stuff mashed together. If you looked at the panels, they all really did something on the ship. And the closer you looked at it, sometimes actors would get a little intimidated. And Mike and I would have to go down the stage and explain. They'd want to know, okay, well, this is serious. How does this work? I remember when it was on...
That's Mike Okuda for everybody at home.
Mike Okuda. Generations, where they had the Enterprise B. And the gal who played Sulu, she took one look at the console and she knew that somebody really thought about this, and she asked for us to come down. And it was such a fun experience because I thought about it a lot. And I sat down at the helm and I showed her, don't be afraid to do a sliding motion, hit a few buttons, look up the screen to see for, what's happening, hit a few more buttons and then go, and she nailed it. And when I watched her in the movie, I saw her do the little slide, which I love.
Nice.
I love to see.
You're like, that's my slide. That's that's the Drexler slide.
I bequeathed it. Is that a pet peeve of yours? Like how people are pressing the buttons on
well, I don't get, bent out of shape or anything, but
but you do pay attention though.
The
button slide.
Yeah, I think the only time Jonathan Frakes used to do this quite a bit, he would sit up on the console with his butt on a whole swath of buttons.
Firing photon torpedoes.
Yeah. But the thing was that we had decided that it really is key to your fingerprints and your biochemistry and things like that in your hands.
No butt dialing. No butt dialing.
Yeah,
Right.
There's no butt dialing in the 23rd century.
Yeah, there's actually a meme about that says, somebody said, hey, Riker's sitting on the thing and firing torpedoes. And somebody else said, look, if we haven't figured out how to fight a butt dial by the 24th century, we're in more trouble than that.
Yeah. I think one of my real pet peeves was when you would give weapons. I mean, they're not real, obviously, and they're supposed to be phasers. But a lot of actors, you need to treat those things like they're dangerous. There are actors who'll use it to like point at somebody. Hey,
hey, you over there.
Yeah, I know. Oops. So they need to. Usually they're so busy on stage and they're trying to move fast, and little things like that get by, and it's totally understandable. Sirach knows what it's like on stage. They're desperate to not fall behind, and make their pages. So things like that sometimes don't seem all that important. But that was always a pet peeve to me. Treat the weapons like weapons.
Yeah, but they are important because those are the physical props we're working with. We're working with the console. We're working with the the tricorders. All of those things mean you have to at least handle it properly. At least look like you know what you're doing.
Yeah, well, I mean the fans are really sharp and they understand the technology. So if you're not paying the proper attention to it, it stands out. Usually it was guests who came in and didn't. I mean, look, when I was a makeup artist, I used to have guys come in to be Klingons who had never even watched the show. They didn't know what a Klingon was. And as a actually, that was one of the great things about being a makeup artist is that you become part of helping the actor find the character. While you're doing the makeup, you'll talk about, well, who was this guy? And, what did he have for breakfast? And, does he have a good family life? But that kind of talk really goes a long way to help an actor. And the one thing I always told actors who came to the show, not knowing what a Klingon was, is I would always refer them to the Ten Commandments, with Charlton Heston. And there's a larger than life quality to everything. People don't, they often they don't speak in contractions like Data.
Right.
As a Klingon, it's opera. You can go as big as you want, and you can't go too far with a Klingon. They're big and bombastic, and just go for it. So that was always great fun.
Now, Doug, before we get too much into it, we should let everybody know exactly what you do, which is you've done visual effects, you've done scenic artistry, makeup, obviously in Star Trek, it's kind of surprising to have somebody that is working on Star Trek behind a computer and doing special effects or visual effects, I should say, but then also doing something tactile, which is, making aliens, for example. I don't know if those two things are connected. Do you feel like those two things are connected, or do you feel like it's two completely different skills?
It's all connected. One thing informs the other. I mean, every time I would switch over to something else, everything, when I would go and being a visual effects artist, when I went to Orville to do graphics for the show, everything that I learned doing visual effects informed things that I was doing when it came to doing graphics on Orville. When I was on Deep Space Nine, I hadn't had that experience yet. What I brought to visual effects, like I said, it's one thing informs the other. You'd be surprised, like somebody who is a visual effects artist and has just sat behind the computer and hasn't worked in the physical world with real light and stuff like that, or lit models, or had to paint a face and see what it looks like on screen or what it looks like through the camera. You bring that to visual effects and CG. That if you've had that experience, it's a real bonus to have worked doing all that other stuff. So yeah, it's all connected, all connected. I probably did more. I probably was involved with more aspects of Star Trek than anybody who ever worked on the show. Makeup, illustration, graphics, visual effects. I, for me, it was like, I started as a makeup artist, and when you get on a show like that, and I draw and I sketch and I paint and I sculpt, you know. So when I'm on stage, I'm looking at that architecture, the sets just blows me away. And Michael Kuda's graphics on Next Gen. I mean, I lived on the Enterprise D as a makeup artist, and I would look at Mike's work and be so blown away by how authentic and how much heart they had, and how he didn't treat anything like it wasn't important. I mean, everything had a purpose, you know. You'd go into engineering, there'd be these fantastic flow charts, and you'd follow them, and they'd all be there. They would all be there, and that's why all of the Roddenberry reboot era, which was Next Generation all the way through the end of Enterprise, was a show that stuck close to Gene, and that meant that you weren't doing science fiction. When you did science fiction, it had to have real thought behind it as far as real technology. You know, guys like Michael Kuda and Rick Sternbach are like junior scientists. You know, I have a good understanding of engineering and science, but those guys really, I mean, when you sit and talk with Mike and Rick about, you know, how many pounds of thrust a certain type of vernier rocket, it's all in their head. So for me, it was like going to school. I had an understanding, but to work with them and understand how what they brought to the show made everything on the show seemed realistic, like it could function. Too often I watch on television shows and movies where they'll just do a design because it's cool, you know. The Enterprises, most of them anyway, you could look at them and half the fun was taking those, you know, like if you look at the Voyager, you could look at it and figure out how it works, how it comes apart. Star Trek fans like to take stuff apart.
Right.
It's a puzzle. It's a big puzzle. If you start looking at stuff and taking it apart and it doesn't work, that's a disappointment. I mean, basically, form follows function, and that's always important. But on Star Trek, you should do form follows function, but it's a little bit more like your car or an automobile, that you want it to look sexy at the same time, not just functional, you know. And that's what Star Trek spaceships are, for me anyway.
You know, a couple things there really quickly. Number one, yeah, tell me about it with all that thrust. Sirach's always like, this ship doesn't have enough thrust to go, you know, warp 4.5 around a planet. That's bogus.
You're my kind of guy. That's important. That's important. It really is. It really is.
But the other thing is kind of something you said kind of perked my ears. You said the Voyager. And I've noticed that on Voyager, the show, that's the only show where they call their ship Voyager, not the Voyager. They say the Enterprise, the Defiant, but they don't say the Voyager. Was there ever a thing where they said, hey, we're going to just start calling it Voyager instead of the Voyager? Or is that just too nitpicky and nobody cares?
No, it's not too nitpicky. I've thought about it myself. I don't know, you know, if I can draw a line to where that really started. Mm-hmm. You know, on the original series, they referred to the Enterprise as the Enterprise. Mm-hmm. But Kirk would still get on the communicator and say Enterprise. He wouldn't say, hey, the Enterprise. You know.
Good point.
I think that ships in the real world, they tend to just say their name, like Nimitz. And Nimitz was off the coast of, you would see you could say it, but I don't know. That's a good thing. Let's look that up.
Let's find out. I have a pretty interesting question, at least for me. I'd like to know, when you switch from creating something for Starfleet over to creating, let's say, a Klingon or Romulan technology, like, what is the basis for, like, saying, okay, this is going to be Romulan, and now how do you apply the Romulan architecture or the Romulan designs into something that you're going to create for it?
Yeah, I mean, for Starfleet, we always tried to keep it close to, hard technology. You might go to make something beautiful, but it wouldn't be fanciful. You'd go a little fanciful on the alien technology because it is alien, you know. Cardassians like things in threes. Romulans tend to have a lot of Art Deco. The colors, you know, one of the things that we had on the show and in the graphics was that Mike would limit each alien race to so many colors, like maybe 4 colors, 5 tops, and the 5th one might be a combination of 2. Because if you use every color under the sun, it just becomes mud. But if you can define which races use which colors, that even if the background panels are blurry, you still know you're on a Romulan ship, even if it's only subliminally by the colors. You know that Klingon, the ships are kind of a rusty color on the bridge, but the consoles, the buttons tend to be reds and yellows. You know, Starfleet is a little more Earth colors going on. Romulans were like an aquamarine, and different shades of blue. So often I'll watch shows on television where the graphics people are using every color there is. And then in the background, it just looks like a blob, you know. It doesn't have, see, that's the thing. On a show like that, where most of the time they're going to be putting actors in front of your graphics. Who are those people in front of our graphics? That we want everything to be amazing when you look at it and sit down close up. But really, you have to keep in mind that most of the time people are going to be seeing it from about the middle of the house, you know, and it's going to be out of focus. And it still has to look good. One of the things that I noticed, I used to see this on Voyager sometimes. I'm not blaming anybody. But there would be panels where it was a big panel of buttons. Every button was lit. And I see this on Voyager, on Orville too, when I got there. And I've changed the aesthetic a little bit so that when you've got a big panel and it's nothing but buttons and they're all lit from the middle of the house and even close up, it just becomes a blob. It has no character. One thing that we always did, and that I'm doing on Orville and we did on Star Trek and Deep Space Nine and Enterprise, was you've got to take that panel of buttons and take a bunch out, turn a bunch off, have negative space and positive space, so that from a distance it has shapes happening. It's not just one blob. There's shapes doing things, so that even when they're out of focus, they're still interesting to look at. Plus, it also creates the sense of hot spots on the panels. There's activity over here. There's no activity over here. If it's nothing but activity, it doesn't tell you anything. It doesn't help you believe in the ship. When you break up panels that way, it makes you think that something's going on and that it's conveying important information. That's just crazy stuff by people. Working on this stuff for so many years, my brain has been warped.
But you bring up something really interesting. I kind of wanted to touch on it a little bit more, which was kind of the way each alien race. By the way, do the Frankenstein thing. He was showing us his second head earlier.
There it is.
Fire bad.
No, but you're kind of telling us about how each alien had its own brand or its own theme of colors. Did you have and of course, when you said that, I started kind of picturing it, and it's true. We can definitely discern which alien race we're seeing based on their backgrounds. Did you have a favorite one, a preferred one that you just loved the colors, or you just thought that they were just so weird or alien that they were the most interesting to you?
You know, because of Mike, I think that most of the panels are really cool. You know, I love Klingon panels, I love Romulan panels, but there is nothing like Starfleet. Oh, and like the Cardassian panels were, if I do say so myself, were awesome. Mike gave me those. I did the whole ops with Denise Okuda.
Wow.
And we tried to make them predatory looking and sharp, and they had a sweep to them, you know. But my favorite is Starfleet. I love what Mike did there, and I just, you know, to do a Starfleet panel was like the biggest thrill for me when we got the Defiant at the station, and I got to lay out all those panels for that show. That was a blast, and I love doing cutaways of ships. I mean, I've done so many ship cutaways. I mean, I did the Voyager cutaway and the, you know, the Defiant and the station, and you know, I just love doing cutaways. It's just one of my things.
You know a little bit more about the Cardassians because this is so fascinating. But when you mentioned Cardassian, you know, panels and ships, I always got this feeling of not just the theme of colors, but almost like it was inspired by a type of animal or a type of organism. It almost felt like not just in their makeup, but in their ships, they almost had a fish or a reptilian kind of design to them. Was there a specific kind of animal you guys were modeling it after?
Well, I mean, they did have a reptilian look to them. They had a little spoon on their foreheads, and when you design for a show like that, you're drawing from everything. If there's already, you know, if there's already Kardashians,
Ferengi.
You know, if they're Cardassians and we already have makeups, we'll take cues for design from those makeups. You know, when it came to designing the exterior of Deep Space Nine, elements of that made their way into the graphics. You know, when I was doing graphics for Ops, I was highly influenced by what Nathan Crowley and Joe Hodges did a lot of the exterior detailing. Rick Sternbach was mostly involved with the overall shape of the station, and Nathan and Joe took it and really, you see, because when Rick did his station, it's still, Rick is a real Starfleet kind of mindset. And the station looked a little too familiar technology-wise. So that's where Nathan and Joe came in, and they gave it that, you know, Cardassian feel with the panels and the, you know, if you want to call them scales or whatever on it. Those made their way into all the graphics on the ship. Same thing with, you know, the Bajorans. I designed the Bajoran logo for Mike, and you know, I had lots of circles happening. If you look at the Bajoran ships, the consoles on the Bajoran ships, it's all circles within circles within circles, because first of all, we've got this round station, but because everything that we know about them is based on the wormhole. It's like a religious artifact, you know.
Interesting.
And that is doing this all the time, like a whirlpool. So that made its way into everything Bajoran, the symbols and the logos and things like that, you know. One of the things I wanted to say about the Starfleet stuff that Mike did through the Roddenberry reboot era, all those graphics and panels are so distinctive that you could not take Starfleet graphics and put them on Hawaii 5-0. You know what I mean? It doesn't work. They're made for Star Trek. I find a lot of graphics on shows that I watch today, they're interchangeable. I could take stuff off of, I'm not going to name any shows, and put them on, you know,
name those shows.
You know, no, they're interchangeable, and that's, to me, that's kind of a failing. They should have a distinctive fingerprint about them, you know, which is what Mike did with everything on all the Star Trek shows that he was involved with. A brilliant guy.
I have a couple. No, I have a couple of things. One is when you talk about the sleekness and design of Starfleet and the way they make their consoles and the ship designs. It makes me think of Apple and how they revolutionized the iPhone and made it streamlined, and you know.
Apple was very influenced by the next generation.
That's what I mean. Yeah. That's what I mean.
You're totally right. And you know, I mean, when they did their iPad, they were thinking of the pads that we used.
They even used the same name
many times on DS9. You know, I mean, holy crap! When I got my first iPad, it was like it was exactly a Starfleet pad. Exactly a Starfleet pad. That was so exciting. They wanted to call it a PADD, Personal Access Display Device. Paramount wouldn't let them.
Wow.
And the same goes for the graphics on the show that Mike did. We have a lot of fans at JPL out in Pasadena. They can recognize the thought in the show. And when you go to JPL, you will see Mike Okuda's LCARS displays as screensavers all over JPL.
Wow.
Years after, because that design just grabbed them, you know. It looked functional and it was cool. You know. But I don't see a lot of that. I don't see a lot of that on shows. You know, you have to get you need someone special to do designs like that. You can't, there's lots and lots of really terrific graphic designers working, you know, out here, but only a few of them can really put those kind of guts into a science fiction interface, like, you know, like the LCARS designs. You have to, it's hard to explain in the same way that people fall in love with Star Trek. It's like, what is it that makes it so? There's almost something in our DNA that makes us want to know what's out there, that there's a genetic thing where we need to do this to go out into space. And that comes across in Star Trek. And so people are motivated because of that, whatever gene it is. Now, I have it when it comes to being crazy about doing these kinds of designs. I mean, first, I'm a Star Trek fan first. I was there in 1966. I watched the whole first season in black and white. We didn't even have a color TV. Although I have to say, a really interesting experiment is watch the original series and turn the color off. I don't know if you, I guess you could still do that on TVs. Turn the color off. Back then, not everybody had a color television set, and they used the DP, Jerry Finnerman, would have to light the original series so that it looked good in color and black and white. With the color off, there still should be graphic elements that break up the... Now you watch a show like Enterprise, for instance, where they're shooting just for color. Turn the color off and it just is mud. But they don't have to think about it that way anymore. It only has to look good in color. I have to say there's really, in a way that's kind of, I mean, it's great that everything's in color, but in a way it's kind of sad that I think that when you have to light for black and white, it gives a strength to your color layouts as well, you know. But it's real, it's interesting. Try it sometime. You know, another one like The Exorcist. I watched The Exorcist in black and white once. I was working for Dick Smith. Dick did all the makeups on The Exorcist. You know, the Linda Blair possession makeup, which that was a movie that movie made me interested in makeup because, you know, you remember there was like the 86-year-old priest, Father Marin, in The Exorcist. The power of Christ compels you. Well, I saw Max von Sydow in another movie like 4 years later, and he was in his 40s. And I'm like, what? And I found out that von Sydow was rubber from here to here, totally rubber. I never noticed. I never thought about it. That was the makeup of the movie, not the Linda Blair makeup.
Wow.
But I was working for Dick Smith, and Dick had to go over to England. We were working on The Hunger, and he had to go shoot stuff in England. And so we were left behind to work in the lab. And we decided to watch The Exorcist at lunch one day. And we turned it on, and we couldn't get the color to come on. We didn't know what it was. So we watched The Exorcist in black and white. And it is amazing in black and white. The funny thing is, though, that when Dick came back and we told him, we watched The Exorcist, but there's no color. And he walked over, turned on the TV, and it was black and white. And he just, like the Fonz, hit it with his elbow, and the color came on. Yeah. Well, you see, that just goes to show you the TVs, the color TVs, they know who's boss because Dick founded the NBC makeup department at Rockefeller Center in New York. He became interested in makeup when he was going to school. And he decided to go into NBC to talk to whoever was in charge of the makeup department. And he said, well, we don't have one. Would you like to start one? Can you imagine that? And so Dick founded the NBC makeup department. And RCA at the time held a patent for color televisions. So when the FCC, Federal Communications Commission, wanted to standardize colors for television, they went to NBC, which was owned by RCA. And NBC said, this is really more about people's faces. Give it to the makeup guy. So it was Dick Smith standardized all the colors on television that you watch today.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Listen to me blathering about Dick Smith, my hero.
Hey, that's awesome. Matter of fact, in honor of the black and white, we might air this whole interview in black and white, right?
I don't have the cognitive ability to do that.
Never mind. But I have a question for you, Doug. Just let me throw this in there. A lot of times, and this is still true to this day, people talk about Deep Space Nine being a dark show. Mm-hmm. And I wondered, what's your take on hearing that criticism of the show and the set of, being dark? Is that something you set out to achieve, or is that something that you feel is not rightfully placed?
Well, I mean, I know that as far as the designs of the show, it was all much darker. There was, dark plum colors with like a Roman gold, and it was elegant, but everything was dark, and there was architecture that was almost haunted house-like in a way. But I think that we all thought that the show was going to be darker in tone. It pretty much was still what they were doing in that brand of Star Trek, like Next Generation. The darkness came in the design of the sets, but they never went and shot it. It was never shot that way, I think that we expected it to be much darker than it was actually done. It was still that bright and shiny universe in this kind of strange, creepy space station, which we never got to. We had ideas in the art department that there would be areas of that station that hadn't even been opened yet. That a lot of it was abandoned, and O'Brien, it would be like going spelunking in caves. He would go and find areas that no one had seen, that had been sealed off, for like 30 years. We thought that the station would be played a little more like a haunted house, I guess. I love Deep Space Nine, and I think it looks fantastic. The design work to go from Next Generation to Deep Space Nine, mm-hmm. with that, they contrast each other really well. It really is. The first time I'll never forget, me and Denise Okuda walking through, was the promenade was it on 18? I can't remember, but it was totally empty. It was they were just about to start laying out the floor where everything was going to go, and there was nothing there. There was a pigeon walking through the stage. I remember me and Denise, we were saying, remember this.
It was probably Odo.
There was an episode where I think Odo was sick, and they had to put him in some kind of device, like a stasis device. And I literally stole Dorothy's bread machine. He is Odo, right?
Okay.
But we used to do a lot of amazing stuff with graphic tape. We would tape up sets. When a set was finished and it was painted, me and Denise and Mike and maybe Anthony Fredrickson we'd have a tape caddy that had all kinds of different widths of black and gold and silver and tape, and go down, and we could put like $10,000 more into that set just with graphic tape by making panels and breaking. If you've got a wall that's got nothing going on, you could go and make something out of that wall that's really cool. We did labels and stickers and things, and I'm sure that Sarakas probably remembers some of the Starfleet. We call them capsule labels. They were these labels about like, See, that's living with Doug. See, I could just reach over and find a couple.
There they are.
Wow.
But they used to have.
Can you hold those up to the camera for a little longer?
These are really early ones. They're backwards.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
Yes. No,
they're right.
Now, the real early ones just had numbers here, down here. But one day, Mike decided to put a few gags in them. And people on stage loved them. And I remember when Entertainment Weekly did an article on Next Generation, they made a special point of showing those labels. And they would say things like, you don't tug on Superman's cape, you don't spit into the wind, you don't pull the mask on the old Lone Ranger, and you don't mess around
with Jim. That's the one.
Yeah, or 186,000 miles per second. It's not just a good idea, it's the law. Stuff like that.
Yes, and I remember also reading on the panels that you would press in the control rooms. There would be names of people that I recognized. So I would say, hey, I know this. I know these people.
You know something? I apologized to you for this many years ago, and it was not to diminish you in any way. It's just that, let's face it, when you first got there, you were just the kid. You know, you grew into being practically an adult on that show, and your power as your character really grew.
Mm-hmm.
But at that point, I mostly for the Starfleet stuff, it was mostly initials from people from the Next Generation, because a lot of those buttons were brought over from Next Generation. The Starfleet stuff was, and your initials weren't on there. And you came up to the art department.
Yes, I did.
I never forgot the embarrassment. I was so embarrassed. I fixed it. I made sure that there were plenty of your initials on there, but I have to tell you, I was so embarrassed about that. And I think about it regularly. I wasn't going to bring it up unless you did. But yeah, so I never forgot that. I never forgot that. Oh my God, what did I do? He'll hate me.
No, I didn't hate you, but I did go up there and actually big fans, to you guys up there, and Okuda obviously just really welcoming and showing me around, and it was like a kid in candy shop over there. If you like to see these kinds of things being made and how it's done, that's where to go.
Well, the art department was always a fun, welcoming place. I loved my time there, and I worked 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, I guess 11 years in art department with Herman and Mike and Denise and Johnny Eves, and we were laughing all the time. I mean, and the practical jokes were like never ending. I mean, I remember that John Eves, one of our illustrators, who's a nut, came in extra early, and Fritz Zimmerman, who sat across from John Eves, and those guys were always pulling pranks on each other. John came in at like 4 a.m. and climbed up, and you know how there's those like kind of foam ceiling panels overhead? They're squares. Took one of them and he hinged it on one side, and he had a monofilament line that he ran to it. When he yanked it, the panel would swing down. So what he did was he made a box out of cardboard up inside that, where it opened up, and got like a 50-pound bag of popcorn and filled it up with like 50 pounds of popcorn up there. And then Fritz is sitting at his desk working. He yanked that cord and the things, all his popcorn comes down. And another good example, and John was like terrible. He got a piece of Limburger cheese, like the stinkingest cheese you could find. Right? And he went to Fritz's desk and he took all of Fritz's drafting pencils and pushed them through the cheese, and then put it back on his desk. And Fritz is like working away, and he's going. Oh my God, we had some fun.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a good place.
You can't beat that one. You guys were working hard in there.
Yeah, boy,
we were. But it's kind of like the crazier things get, the sillier you have to become.
Yeah.
Because if you can't laugh, then you're really in trouble. You got to find the funny in everything. And I always found for myself that whether it was makeup or visual effects or whatever, the later or the greater the pressure or as screwed up as things would get, the funnier they got. I mean, we would just be laughing our asses off because it was so crazy, so insane, you know?
Yeah, I meant to ask you about that. Um, there's a lot of pressures for all of us, to perform and get it right. And I'm sure there's a lot of pressure on you guys to get things done the way they want it done. Was there a moment where you were like, this is too much for me, or this is just like, what are we going to do? Did you ever find those kinds of moments?
I've had so many moments like that. I mean, and I mean, and look, I'm laughing about it now. And I was, even the truth is that even as things were falling, down around your shoulders, that I would still be laughing and finding jokes, about what was going on. If you get panicky, you're going to lose it. You won't figure it out, and especially if you're a makeup artist, because you can hold up camera as a makeup artist. If you hold up camera for half an hour, that's a lot of money. You could get in a lot of trouble. Uh, with the pressures are great for art department and visual effects, but and you're trying to get things done under real tight deadlines. I mean, there were Battlestar Galacticas where we delivered the last visual effects shot the morning that the satellite uplink happened, and they watched it on television that morning.
Yikes.
But
Wow.
it's still not like, all due respect to the first AD and the second AD, and they don't want you to screw up. They don't want something to go wrong. But if you give them something, they will happily put that on their report that makeup held up camera, because they know they're going to fall behind. So they need to say, well, makeup held us up an hour. So as much as they might be your friend and they want you to do a good job, if you give them something good to put on their report, they're going to take it. It's up to you to make sure that things like that never happen. I mean, oh God, there was one time, and it's visual effects oriented because things would overlap. If you're in the art department, sometimes you would get involved with visual effects stuff. We had an episode of Enterprise where Dan Curry wanted to do a shot, the visual effects supervisor, up above looking down into these. It was a little village in a rocky recess that that had all these paths and but basically he wanted to shoot our characters looking down on them in this little village, so they were going to have to build a platform on stage and put the camera up there. Now, an episode before that, we had a show where the guys had to go on the hull of the NX Enterprise. And I worked with Dan Curry to set up all the shots in a virtual camera. And he could get the shots, and I could say, okay, camera's off the ground 12 feet. It's pitched, about 15 feet negative and blah, blah, blah. And then he could go to stage, shoot the guys using all of that, take them back to the visual effects house, and they could take the model of the ship. I could give them the files that I set up, and they're on their way. So he wanted to do it on this episode where we had this little village happening. I set up everything with him sitting right there, all the information. The next day, he's down on stage with the second unit, and nothing is lining up. Nothing's lining up. And I get called to stage. And I'm there, and Dan basically, Dan, if you're listening, he pretty much threw me under the bus. It was up to me to work it out. He just went off and, was chatting with somebody else. And I had all these people around me, the DP, the director, everybody like this at me. And that can be really overwhelming. And you're like, what the fuck? I'm going to lose. I didn't think I was going to lose my job or anything, but I knew that I had to get myself out of this. And, I had been through quite a bit in my life working on film and television shows. And I just snapped in realizing that I got to act like I'm in charge. Once I do that, they'll fall right in line. I guarantee it. And I just, I turned around and said, look, guys, we can just try to figure out who's to blame here, or we can make it work. What I want you to do is pick up this platform and move it back 10 feet for me. And they just as soon as you tell them what to do, they're incredible. The crew's amazing.
Yeah.
But up until then, they're all like, you did it, you did it, you did, all trying to figure out who screwed it up. Who screwed it up isn't important. We got to get the shot.
Yeah.
What do we do now to make this work? And if you crumble, you're doomed. You have to take charge. And once you take charge, they will all fall in to do anything that you need them to do. And that was one moment I remember. I mean, I had some, my God, I mean, so many of them. One of the things I remember was when I was doing makeup on Next Generation. Most of the makeup artists would just put the makeup on people and then they'd go and sit, have a cup of coffee or something like that. But, I came from my own makeup company. We did, I had just come from Dick Tracy. We did all those faces on Dick Tracy. And it was my habit to look through the camera lens. I want to see what the DP sees. I don't want to look at it from over here. I want to know exactly what he's seeing through his camera. And the first time I did that, everyone was shocked. But because I had just come from a big picture with Warren Beatty, they were like, oh, okay. Yeah, sure, whatever you want. And I remember Mike Westmore telling me later, thanking me, that I did that because I'm making him look good.
And you were looking for makeup, right? To see
makeup.
If there was any imperfections or anything that you needed to touch.
Well, the thing is, when you're doing appliances, there's edges that have to blend off. Not everybody is really good at blending an edge who's a makeup artist. Not every foam latex appliance that comes out of a mold has a good edge on it. Sometimes those things were baked the night before and they come out and the edges suck. So it's like, now what are you going to do? Well, you're going to have to pull out every trick in the book to blend those things in. Back then on DS9 or Next Generation, whatever you saw on screen is what it looked like on stage. If there was a bad edge and the DP isn't going to... See, the thing is, it's a camera trick. The DP has to help you. I've had conversations with DPs before where they're like, well, it's not my fault if there's an edge there. I'm like, yeah, but you could put a light over here and fill in that edge and no one will ever see it. And if you have a good DP, they'll do it for you. Or you'll get someone who's a diva who says, I'm the author of the cinematography and I don't listen to you. I'm in charge. There's egos sometimes that you have to deal with.
Sounds like they're all Italian too.
Well, this guy was, who I'm making fun of here is Vittorio Storaro. When we were on Dick Tracy, he spent a long time thinking about how he was going to light Dick Tracy. The thing was that he didn't know enough about makeup to realize what certain kinds of light will do to an appliance. It's not skin. I mean, now there's a piece that you could make silicone appliances where light actually passes through them and diffuses through them, which is the way skin is. When you're using foam latex and you've got a layer of paint on it, the light is hitting it and it's going, it's not diffusing out. So it's a camera trick. The DP can make that happen for you. Today, a bad edge is no big deal. If there's something wrong in the makeup that's looking bad, you could have post fix it now. They could bring it into a program like After Effects and blend that edge off in post. You couldn't do that back then. If it was a bad edge, it was a bad edge. And it was like, hello, I'm an edge.
Yeah.
But now, like for instance, in the Avengers, you've got a character, Vision. I don't know if you remember Vision.
Yeah.
That if you look at the green screen stuff that they shot of him, the makeup is only 60% of it. They're going to take it the rest of the way in post by having CG headpieces and stuff like that. And you can make it like a whisper, beautiful. So there's a big difference about the way makeup was back then and the way it is now. I mean, we were fixing makeup stuff on Battlestar Galactica. There was notoriously bald caps are really difficult because this is one of the most mobile pieces on a human being. Plus, all day long, there's oils that come out of your skin or you're sweating, and the glue will start to move, and now you're getting funny creasing. And best bald cap I ever saw was done by Dick Smith on a Taxi Driver with Robert De Niro. You know, where he shaves his head and he's got the mohawk?
Yeah.
Well, it looks great, right? That was a bald cap. But what Dick did is, and man, that guy was a genius. He shaved De Niro's head up to about here. That way he was able to glue to the bone, where the bone is, where nothing's flexing. And then he put an appliance over that. Nowadays, you could have I'm sure you've seen it plenty of times on television where someone turns their head and you get all these crazy wrinkles.
Yes.
Usually they'll put a collar on someone to try to hide that stuff. We did, like there was a bald cap on Battlestar Galactica. What was her name? Mary. She was Madam President. How can I not remember her last name?
Yeah, it started with an M, I think, her last name too, possibly. Anyway,
I don't know.
The president, yeah.
Well, anyway, she had cancer, and there were a couple episodes where she had no hair. And so they did a bald cap, but there's only so much you could do. That might be a lot of hair that you have to hide. And so her head will be like a light bulb. It'll be in the shape, But we used to be able to go in post and, stretch her head back into shape frame at a time. It's a lot of work.
Wow.
But
the lady's name is Mary McDonald, by the way.
Yeah, she's, when I got that job, first of all, I was on Enterprise. We knew that something was up with Enterprise. You know how you know when maybe there's going to be a problem?
Uh-oh.
You're in the art department, and people you never saw before are coming in with tape measures and measuring the room. And like we looked at each other and we're like, that's a bad sign. When we found out the show was canceled, we didn't find out from the front office. We found out on the fledgling internet at the time. And I remember driving home. I'd been on the show like 17 years. That's crazy. You usually don't get a gig like that, and I'm thinking, boy, I'm never going to work again. I'm sure I used up everything. That's all my good luck. There's not going to be any more. And I got home, and Dorothy meets me at the door and says, there's a message from Gary Hutzel on the phone for you. The night I found out Enterprise was canceled.
Gary Hutzel?
Yes, Gary was, I'm sure you knew him. He was a visual effects supervisor on Deep Space Nine. And he was a wonderful guy. And like I said, if you worked in the art department, you worked closely with visual effects, because if Gary was doing a show and he ran out of money, he knew that he could come to us and we would build a Klingon space station out of junk, sewage strainers and colanders and, all kinds. We kept stuff. And Gary,
a Romulan would remind you that a Klingon cruiser is junk, by the way.
Yeah.
Well, yes, it should be hauled away as garbage.
That's what the line I was thinking of. That's a Klingon saying that to the relationship. Yeah.
When we did that episode, Trials and Tribulations, that was like a high watermark for us. I mean, me and Mike and Denise, and we were all big time original series fans. And to get to go back and recreate those sets was just like mind boggling for us. We were so excited. And you look at them today and it's still amazing what we did. That was a time, I have to say that I'd been studying to work on Star Trek since I was like 13 years old when the original series was on. And I collected slides and photos and newspaper clippings. And when we did Trials and Tribulations, I had stuff I had saved since I was 13 years old to use as reference material.
Wow.
Now you could go on the internet and I could type in Enterprise Bridge and 60,000 things will come up. Back then, you couldn't do that. If you didn't have the stuff already, there was no place to get it. Paramount didn't have anything; they had nothing. So we recreated all those sets from reference material that I'd been saving for years and years and years and years. We had VHS tapes at the time. So I was telling my story. I got sidetracked. That's one of the things. I tend to go off, and I'm driving home. I'm thinking, I've had it. I come home and Dorothy says, there's a message from Gary Hutzel. And Gary, I knew, was in Vancouver on Battlestar Galactica. I'm thinking, oh my God, he's going to ask me to come to Galactica. And I call him, and he says, I heard about Enterprise. I'm like, yeah. And he says, well, every cloud has a silver lining. And that's when he asked me to come and be CG supervisor on Galactica. Now, Ron Moore's Galactica is more a descendant of Star Trek, those shows that we did, than Battlestar Galactica. If you ever watched the old Galactica, when I got look, I had seen it. I wasn't hooked on it like I was Star Trek. But when I got on the new one, I said, I'm going to go buy the series. I'm going to watch it, learn everything about it. I'd seen it before. Man, I got about 4 episodes in, and I was like, oh, watch it anymore.
Oh, no.
It's really, listen, there were charming characters and, some fun stuff, but ultimately it was for the kiddies, It was really weird to me that in the pilot episode, they lost, the whole planet was destroyed by Cylons, and they go to like a discotheque and they're partying and smoking weed. You don't even care.
It was 1979, baby. 1979.
Get over it, man.
So yeah, Gary didn't forget me. He snatched me up right away. I went right from Enterprise to Battlestar Galactica, which was.
And so you
amazing.
did go to Vancouver, or did you move there? Did you move to Vancouver? Or?
I was in Vancouver for 1 season. They treated me really well, man. I mean, I had a fantastic apartment in the middle of Vancouver, which is a great city. I had they rented me a Jeep. A Jeep. It was a Wrangler or something, that they rented. And I would drive to work in, and then they gave me on top of that, they gave me a per diem,
Nice.
Money on top of my pay. It was really, look, it's hard to be away from home. I don't want to be away from home, but if I had to do it, that was a really great way to, for it to happen. Galactica was a fantastic experience. And Gary was just one of the funniest, nicest. We laughed constantly. Everything was a big joke to us, And we did some incredible work on that show. We got a couple of Emmys for it. And you watch it today, and even though it was how many years ago now, this stuff still is like feature quality.
It ended 12 years ago.
You know what it was about that show? First, there was a lot of Star Trek people went over there. You had Ron Moore, who produced it, and then you had Gary, and I was there. And art department was Richard Hadolin and Doug McLean, and I idolized those guys, the work that they did. Forgot where I was going with that. That's what happens.
It happens.
No,
it's happening more all the time.
I had a question about. I see that you still have the stickers that you put up on the stations.
Yeah.
What is your favorite little treasure trinket that you've kept from Star Trek over the years?
Wow.
I see the robot behind you.
I think Lost Ryan in Space.
Yeah,
Ryan has one of those.
Yeah, I got. Let's see.
Oh boy, we're about to get a tour of sci-fi stuff.
History.
If I could do this without destroying, like if you look over here, I've got. I got a Nomad. See Nomad?
I don't know. I thought I saw a Mugatu up there for a second.
Well, there's a. Oh God. See up there? That's the spacesuit.
Oh wow.
With Kirk in it from Star Trek: The Motion Picture.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That flies around Epsilon 9, and I've got so much stuff. I've got in my garage. I've got a 14-foot. It's not a miniature. There was a show called My Favorite Martian when I was a kid.
Right.
It had Ray Walston in it as a Martian. Ray Walston was a big Broadway star, and Bill Bixby. Remember Bill Bixby?
Yeah.
The Hulk TV show. What happens is that the Martian crashes on Earth, and Bill Bixby finds him, and he nurses him back to health, and he can't go back to Mars because his ship is messed up, and it's hidden in his garage. He's got to keep that a secret. It's not the actual one. It was a copy. It was used in Men in Black 2. It's an exact duplicate of Uncle Martin's spaceship from My Favorite Martian. It's my garage. Yeah. So I just I got a 4-foot sea view over here. I've got a 5-foot Nautilus from about 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Wow.
The Disney film, which is one of my favorite science fiction movies of all time.
Yeah.
but yeah, it's like I'm a fan, and it's not just a job to me. I don't want to work on a show really that's about a law firm. It's great to work. It's great to work, be in the business, but I'm meant to do certain things, you know, and that is science fiction, and anything with technology is just something I'm possessed by it.
Mhm.
What is there any one particular thing? God, that's really really hard to say. Um, that's a hard answer. That's a hard answer.
That kind of shoots my question then, because I had a similar question that might be equally difficult to answer. Actually, we're almost out of time here, but two quick, fun, nerdy questions for us nerds. Number one is Star Trek related. What was your favorite creation? Like, was it a specific backdrop that you created, or a ship, or something like that? And then the second one is going to be the upcoming third season of the Orville. What do you think the fans are going to feel when they see it? Do you think they're just, above all, they're going to laugh? Do you think above all they're going to be blown away by the special effects, or what?
Well, Brandon Fayette, who's the supervisor who does the visual effects on the show, is a great guy. And they're really doing some ambitious stuff this season. It's funny, I was riding with him across the 20th Century Fox lot to one of the stages, and he says, I was 8 years old when I watched Next Generation. Holy cow. But yeah, and people can really be affected by stuff that you've worked on. I will say that Orville, it's a dramedy, it's not a sitcom, but funny things happen in it. I found that from season 1 to season 2, the show got a little more serious,
Mhm.
and season 3 is funny, but they want to tell a real story. It's not just funny things happening to people. So every episode has, there's really a lot going on. It's funny. I just watched one last night. I can't remember the name of it. It had Tim Russ in it. They find a time capsule.
Yeah, second season.
Yeah, and there's an iPhone, and Scott Grimes' character takes it, and they're able to feed all the information from it into the computer, and the computer can recreate this gal's world. And he ends up going in there and falling in love with her. And it's a really sensitive, warm story. It's great stuff. I find Orville is a little more the way I like my Star Trek, where it's not grim. You know what I mean? It's funny. I was just reading an article today. Patrick Stewart, even though he's the star of Picard, says that he was shocked by the use of profanity on Picard. I think that they use the F word.
A few times.
F word is fuck, by the way.
Yes, I thought it was Ferengi.
And you know what? See, for me, I don't want to see these people being just like us. You know what I mean? That we can't talk without using profanity and being crude and being horrible to each and mean to each other. When I watch Star Trek, they don't need to talk like that. They're more evolved, And I don't want to see the Admiral saying fuck, that pulls me out. Now, I've had people say, oh, what's wrong with you? That's the way people talk. Yes, I know that. I talk that way too, but I don't want them to be talking that. I think there was a scene in Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, where Kirk explains to Spock why the profanity. People think that in order to be, recognized, they have to. I don't think there's a place for that on Star Trek. I think those people should be better than we are. But as far as Orville goes, I guarantee you that design-wise, they really raised the bar for season 3, and I thought they were doing pretty good already. God, I mean, the stuff I've seen that I can't talk about.
And it looks beautiful so far. The things that we have seen in the first 2 seasons are beautiful.
You know, I like to tell, you know, Robert Strohmeyer, who's the art director on the show, you know, and this is, I'm not bragging or anything, but I've seen everything, man. You know, for television science fiction. I've lived on the Battlestar Galactica. I lived on the Enterprise D. I lived on Deep Space Nine. You know, I've seen a lot of amazing sets. And there's some stuff in there that's just going to knock you out.
Nice.
And I cannot wait till people can see some of the stuff. I came in at a real good time to the show because they spiffed up a few things that I got to, you know, put my thumbprint on. And Robert Strohmeyer said that to me. He goes, well, you came in at a good time to make an impact, you know. So, and that was to have him say that to me was wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, we've got this crazy virus. You know, I wish that people would, I don't know what it is, where it's not a big ask to wear a mask, you know.
And it rhymes.
And it rhymes too.
That's a meme right there. It's not a big ask. Just wear your mask.
Yeah, we'd be back to work by now, you know. Yeah. And I'm afraid that we're going to see. I don't think we're not out of the woods yet, you know. No. So I don't know when we're going to go back. I hope it's before the new year.
You know, I wanted to second your point though that you made about the F-bombs in the new Picard show. And that was something I think that I pointed out too as well, Ryan. If I didn't notice it watching it, and I thought it was excessively used. I think I could tolerate maybe one for like a moment that was just a point, you know, you want to put extra emphasis on. But I did think it was used too casually. And the other thing that bothered me was when we were doing DS9, one of the things that they made sure we did was stick to the script, and they didn't want certain words that remind us of time periods to be used.
Right.
So, you know, like, hey, what's happening, man? You know, that's something that's a greeting that we use, you know, that it has a period to it, right?
It's dated.
Yeah, you don't want to date it too much.
Yeah. And so I felt the same thing that you felt, which is I don't see the place for these curse words in the show where it's not necessary. Okay, once in a while for emphasis, you can say a damn or a shit or something like that. But I think it was a little bit excessive to just be dropping F-bombs every time you get mad, because there's different ways to express yourself. And I thought Star Trek was the best at getting that done in a you know, being articulate and being an intelligent show.
Well, right. I know that it was important to Gene Roddenberry to show us it's our better angels, you know. So we've come a long way, and that was always a point on the show, that people were more understanding, more empathy, more sensitivity, you know. That's, to me, that's always been such an important part of Star Trek. I know that writers tend to rebel against that. They feel like they're being wedged into a goody two-shoes type of interaction. But I really, and look, I don't write, I've never written a script before, you know, and I've never been on a writing staff before. So I could understand how you might chafe under that. But I think that maybe it takes a little more work, a little more creativity to figure out how to get your point across emotionally without resorting to what I think is a cheap shot, you know. I mean, one of my favorite shows is Deadwood. You ever see Deadwood? It's a Western. If you haven't seen it, man, HBO. It only lasted 3 seasons, but it's one of the best TV shows ever. The language on that show, there are people who can't watch it because of the language.
I'm listening.
Their favorite word was, you could edit this out, you could bleep this, right?
Yeah, go ahead.
This isn't live, right? Number 1 word on Deadwood was cocksucker. That cocksucker. Cocksucker's from San Francisco. holy geez. When Dorothy and I first watched it, it was like a punch in the eye. Holy, did he just say what I thought he said? And it actually takes you a little while to desensitize yourself to that word. I mean, it's not a word that I really even, I use profanity, but I rarely use that. I rarely use that word.
Yeah.
That's really going for the. But David Milch, who was the writer and creator of the show, he was trying to create this sense of shock. That I'm sure they didn't use the same words we use now, but he had to use words that would shock people today to get that grittiness across on the show. And on a show like Deadwood, it totally works. But if Picard said it,
oh man,
watch Deadwood, man. I'm telling you, give it a few episodes.
Yeah, I think a lot of people echo those sentiments where they just kind of felt like it's a little off-brand. I think that's really what it is it doesn't quite fit with the Star Trek brand. But whatever, it's rebranding. They're doing their own thing.
The only thing I could say is that it's kind of like going to your favorite restaurant and have that sinking feeling when you realize it's under new management.
You mean Hooters?
Restaurant?
What's going on here?
Girls.
New management?
Hey, we are out of time, though. I'm sorry to say. I did kind of want to ask you a second time, though. Did you have a favorite creation?
Oh yeah, you did ask me that.
Well, I hit you with two questions. That was
fall in love. You have to fall in love with everything you do, but not to the point where you're married to it, because it could be thrown out just like this.
Mm-hmm.
You could slave over something and go, nope, just like that. But so, there were a lot of challenges and a lot of fun things. I guess that probably, trials and tribulations to recreate the original series sets. Amazing. But then when Enterprise started up, I was at Foundation Imaging, and I had worked on Voyager doing visual effects. That was where I was learning how to do CG. And when they did Enterprise, I didn't want to do graphics again. I just done it for 7 years on the show. And I thought that the visual effects aspect was really interesting. But John Eves was doing designs for the NX Enterprise, and he must have done like 30 of them. And the thing I can tell you is that John's terrific. I'm sure they were all good. The thing about a producer is that they will make you do as many as you can until there's no more time, because they want to see every possible thing. They're not going to decide early on that, oh yeah, that's it, when they can make you do another 20. So it got to a point where John had to move on to doing other things. And Mike Okuda said to Herman, why don't you invite Doug back? He's up at Foundation Imaging on Voyager. Have Doug come back. He'll bring everything he learned about CG to the art department. And that's what happened. And it was the first time a ship was designed in the art department using CG. Up until then, it was all sketches. And you know what? If you're a really amazing artist, you can make a turd look fantastic.
Like Sirach does. Great doodles. Great turd doodles.
Turd drawings.
But when you're designing the ship in CG, I could now make a turntable where it turns and you could really see it as the light moves across it. I could animate a shot of it passing by the camera. So I designed the NX with Herman for Enterprise. So to design an Enterprise, actually I designed two Enterprises. I designed the NX and I designed the J, which was a future Enterprise. Uh-huh. And it's funny, fans are real touchy when it comes to Enterprise. And they don't like any new Enterprise, I find, basically. They hate the idea of the idea that it's replacing something they already love. But I remember when I did the J, I realized that it was important that when people looked at it, that they say, that's ridiculous. Because if they don't think it looks ridiculous, it means you didn't push it far enough.
Right.
When I was a kid, and I saw that original series Enterprise, it was unlike any other spaceship up until that time. Up until then, they were rocket ships. They landed on their tails, which is crazy because now they're doing that again. Mm-hmm. Rockets land on their tails. Who would have ever? It's amazing. So one of the arguments I would have with early fans was the struts that held in the cells. They're so spindly that they'll never support that engine. First of all, it's not an engine, okay? It's holding a generator that creates a warp field. But when I saw those struts, I didn't say, that's really stupid. That architecturally could never support. I said, wow, those people understand technologies way beyond us to be able to have struts like that. That's what that said to me. So when I designed the J, I made sure to put things in there that to a 21st century, early 21st century brain, an ape's brain, that it would look impossible. If it didn't look impossible, I hadn't pushed it far enough. So I pushed it into the ships. I made it 3 miles long. So, excuse me. But smog.
Yeah.
Where are you guys anyway? Are you in LA or where are you?
Los Angeles, yeah.
You are?
Yeah.
You're in LA too? Sometime. Where in LA are you?
I'm in North Hollywood.
Oh, I'm in the Valley too.
Yeah, we should get together. I can show you my toys once all of this is over.
Will I get to say danger, Will Robinson, or that guy behind you? All right.
But you do know what they say about guys that drive big ships.
That drive. Yep.
What do they say, Sirach?
They say they have a nice warp engine.
Okay.
A warp drive.
Sorry about your.
Yeah. So we'll pretend like we have no idea what that means.
Oh yeah, not at all. Not at all.
Anyway, we do have to run. Doug, this has been awesome. We'd love to talk with you again.
Yeah, it was great hanging out with you guys.
Oh yeah.
Tons of
wow,
fun.
Sirach, it's amazing to see you.
You too, and I feel like we can do this for like another 10 hours because there's so many questions I have.
Undoubtedly.
And you know everybody, so I mean, when we do this again, I want to ask you some more questions about.
Great. I'll look forward
your life
to that.
experiences. Yeah, love to do it.
Yeah, it's
awesome.
Fun.
Hey, lads.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Doug Drexler. Everybody at home,
thank you.
You've seen all of his work and like all of
the
the Star Trek series. You're going to see his new stuff on the Orville, or as I like to call it, the Snorville. No, I'm just kidding. I love it. I love
he loves the Orville.
Let me
I actually do. I really like it a lot.
You won't be sleeping.
Yeah, no, I actually like it a lot. I think
he can't wait for season 3. He knows it.
Season 3 is going to be so cool.
Yeah, no, it really it's captured 90s Star Trek and added a little humor and humanity to it. I think it's beautiful. I think it has achieved what it set out to achieve. I'm really happy.
Seth MacFarlane is a pretty amazing guy. I mean, you'd be surprised, but he's actually a very shy person, believe it or not. But look, here's a guy who writes, directs, produces. He's even got albums where he sings. You know, I was like, what can't this guy do? It's kind of a
baseball.
Little bit of a genius. Baseball?
All right. Well, thanks very much, Doug Drexler. It's been awesome. Everybody at home, check out all of his cool information in the description box below. And we'll see you on the next video, guys. Thank you.
All right.
See you guys.